Welcome to the Angular Data Grid component tutorial. Last time, you saw how to create a new Angular application and integrate the Angular Data Grid. In this video, I'll show you how to bind data to the Angular Data Grid using a local JSON file. I'll also explain the different types of adapters and how to bind remote data sources, such as OData v4. If you recall, my previous video was on how to bind local data to a data grid. I will begin by opening an existing Angular application. If you want to learn how to get started with the Angular Data Grid, check out the video in the card or description. I had created a new data source file under the source folder and defined the object array. I imported this array into the app.ts file and populated the data grid by binding it to the data source property. To display only the required columns in the grid, I declared the columns directive with the customization for only those columns in the app.html file. This way, you can bind the local data to the data grid. But in real-world applications, most of the time, your grid will need to load data from remote services. So, I will show you how to bind an external data source to an Angular data grid. To bind remote data, use Syncfusion's DataManager, which acts as a gateway for both local and remote data sources and uses queries to communicate with the backend. Each data source uses a different approach of accepting requests and sending back responses. You should mention the specific adapter based on the type of data source. Syncfusion provides different adapters to help DataGrid work with various backend services. The OData v4 adapter is used for OData-based APIs, with the v4 version meant for newer OData services. The Web API adapter is designed for ASP.NET Web API endpoints. The URL adapter is used for custom REST APIs with HTTP POST. It is the appropriate adapter for all SQL, MySQL, and Entity Framework databases. The GraphQL adapter works with GraphQL services and helps fetch only the data fields necessary. The Remote Save adapter improves performance by handling client-side operations like sorting and filtering while sending only the actual CRUD operations to the server. Sometimes your backend may not follow any standard response format, or you may need to apply custom logic while sending or receiving data. In such cases, use a custom adapter. Pick one of the built-in adapters as your base. Override the methods you need, like process response, and then assign this custom adapter to the DataManager to shape the request or modify the response exactly the way your application requires. However, in this video, I will focus only on the OData v4 adapter. If you want to learn about the other adapters, you can refer to the Syncfusion documentation. Now, let me show you how to bind an OData v4 service. Returns an object with a value array, which contains the data to be bound to the grid component. To connect the data grid to an OData v4 adapter, first, I import DataManager, an OData v4 adapter modules from Syncfusion EJ2 data package. In the export class, I declare a public property named data with a type annotation of DataManager. In the Angular ng-on-init lifecycle hook, I assign data to a new instance of DataManager. That instance receives a configuration object with a URL from the OData endpoint. Because the endpoint is OData v4, I set the adapter to a new OData v4 adapter. You can see that I have configured the URL to request only the first 10 records. In the app.html file, I need to assign this DataManager instance to the data source property of the Angular grid. Also, you can see that I have defined the required columns using column directives. Now, I run the application using the ngserve command. In the output, you can see the Angular grid populated with records retrieved from the OData v4 service. Each field defined within that OData v4 service is displayed in the grid. Next, I will show you how to enable paging, filtering, and sorting options. To enable these features, I import the required services from the grid package, such as PageService, Page Settings Model, FilterService, and SortService. I define the provider's array with the required services added. Inside the export class, I define the page settings to Page Settings Model, and an ng-on-it method. I set the page size to 5, so the grid will display 5 records per page. Since paging is enabled, I remove the condition that was applied to display only 10 records. In the HTML file, I set the allow paging property to true and bind the grid's page settings property to the page settings variable defined in the component. Then, I enable allow filtering and allow sorting by setting both properties to true. Now, I'm checking the output. You can see that the grid is enabled with paging, sorting, and filtering features. Let me wrap up this video. In this video, I have shown you how to bind local data to the Angular Data Grid, connect the grid to a remote OData v4 service using DataManager, and enable some of its features. If you want to explore other adapters such as Web API, URL, GraphQL, or Remote Save, please check the Syncfusion documentation. If you want to try out the example used in this video, download it from the GitHub link in the description below. I have also shared a link to learn how to obtain a free license key to use our Angular components through our community license if you are eligible. Thank you for watching this video.